All right. Hey, YouTube, how's it going? Let's get started. Welcome, guys. Happy Thursday. And we've got some cool stuff to go over today, as usual. And I'm going to be talking about expanding orgasm today. So, give me just a second, guys. All right. So, first of all, really exciting changes coming up in my life. I'm going to be spending the next few months, the indefinite next few upcoming months, traveling around the US, maybe beyond the US. We'll see how things are, looking at that point. But I'm getting rid of most of my material possessions and I'm just hitting the road and be traveling around with Mariah. I love traveling. It really shifts up my habits. It really helps me stay fresh and in the flow and like really prioritize what's actually important in my life, which is my practice and my, development of all the things I'm interested in. And you really learn what's truly important and what's just a distraction when you're in that kind of state of flow, wandering about and traveling. So really excited for that. I'm going to be all over the US. I'm going to be hosting some different workshops and retreats and things like that. I'll be sharing more about those as soon as I kind of get that confirmed. But yes, welcome everyone. Always good to see you guys. I'm going to be talking about expanding orgasm here. So what is orgasm and how do we expand it, right? This is something that I've been interested in a long time. And we have kind of the dictionary clinical definition of orgasm, which, I could pull it up and look at it. In fact, let's pull up the official definition of orgasm, because it's a bit limited, I would say. And we're going to really expand on this. Okay, so here we go. The official definition of orgasm is a climax of sexual excitement characterized by feelings of pleasure centered in the genitals and in men experienced as an accompaniment to ejaculation. So, this is a definition: feelings of pleasure centered in the genitals and a man's ejaculating. That's the official definition of orgasm, right? Well, I want to encourage you guys to expand this definition, and I'm going to share what I define as orgasm, because it has really liberated me in my practice. And this is something I think especially relevant to men, whereas women are pretty effortless, it's more likely for women to naturally be multi-orgasmic and have full body orgasm experiences over and over and over again, because they have this, just kind of a different sexual wiring, whereas men, we have a little different relationship with our genitals, because our penis, our testicles, they kind of hang out here outside of the body. So it kind of, it's like this external relationship in relation to the rest of the body. Whereas women, the sexual organs are inside of their body. And there's this natural kind of internal flow of that orgasmic energy when they orgasm. Whereas men, our natural tendency, especially as we've been conditioned to, is to have this release of energy outward. So talking about this outward peak orgasm, which, it's an enjoyable experience. It definitely feels great. But the problem with this, when this is your only experience of orgasm, as I'm sure a lot of you know, because I talk about this all the time, it's an expenditure of your life force. You are taking something away every time you ejaculate, and it's not such a big deal in your teenage years and maybe your early 20s, but there comes to a point in your life where it starts to deplete you if you indulge in this ejaculatory orgasm too much. So 5 seconds of pleasure and then a day or two of kind of a hangover, right? But we can change this. This is the great thing. This is what really drew, one of the things that drew me into sexual kung fu, because I was really frustrated of the cycle of feeling very, very aroused, high sexual excitement, and then a little short-lived sexual pleasure, and then an ejaculatory orgasm, and then not being able to continue with that sexual pleasure. It's a very up and down thing, and sometimes it's a lot more down, especially if you're becoming depleted. So for men, you can really learn to dramatically expand and intensify and enhance the experience of orgasm without the need to ejaculate, meaning that you can, basically have this infinite orgasmic potential, which women actually have naturally, right? And I think there's often this kind of split between men and women, because men often get a bit jealous that women can naturally just have all these multiple orgasms over and over, have this unlimited sexual endurance, whereas men, again, men are fire, women are water, and men's fire is quick to burn out. So we have to compensate through that by rewiring ourselves and building more of this sexual fire and being able to balance this dynamic. So talking about this newly defined definition of orgasm, I encourage you to explore. I like to define orgasm simply as a heightened sensation of pleasure within the body. I mean, it can really be within the mind and the spirit as well. A heightened sensation of pleasure that's kind of outside what most people consider to be their normal experience, though it will become your normal experience as you practice more and more, right? So that's a pretty, it's kind of a broad definition, and it gives you a lot to do with that, right? So now we can really expand that wave of sensation of pleasure into very, very high levels. This is the big problem for one of the big problems for men when they're trying to learn how to have non-ejaculatory orgasms is they're very stuck and very conditioned into what they believe an orgasm should look like and should feel like and should be experienced like. So men try to learn these practices expecting to have the ejaculatory orgasm type of experience minus the ejaculation, just being able to do that over and over and over. That's not exactly it. There's techniques where you can kind of do that, where you like go to the edge and go to the point of ejaculation, squeeze the pelvic floor, hold in the ejaculate, or you relax entirely, and you'll have these weak kind of ejaculatory type of orgasms over and over. But that's not really the type of method I focus on. I think that's very limiting. I'm talking more about this full body, very energetic, waving experience of this orgasmic energy just flooding through your body. And with time and practice, it becomes much more intense than an ejaculatory orgasm. So again, this new definition of orgasm, it's subtle in the beginning, right? This is the whole thing, is that as men, we're often looking for this big, explosive, obvious peak orgasm type experience. And there's a tendency to overlook what they are actually feeling. And because they're overlooking it, they're often projecting into the future. You're trying to create a certain experience. So you're projecting the future because you have a certain expectation. You're actually disconnected from what you are feeling right now, because you're probably actually feeling immense amounts of pleasure, but because you're like, well, it's not the ejaculatory type of orgasm. So how can I bring it to that level? So you're disconnecting from the moment, you're disconnecting from what's actually happening in your body or your mind. And you're chasing this thing that you're very rigid about, right? And this isn't how you go about experiencing this more expanded non-ejaculatory type of experience. It really requires having more sensitivity, being able to feel and listen inward, to feel withinward, to be a bit more receptive, right? It's not something you can really force yourself into. And this goes against a lot of, what's natural for men, I think, is we want to be able to like use our force and our strength to just make things happen, which we're good at in a lot of ways. But with this new expanded type of orgasm, it simply does not work. It's something that you must kind of ride like a wave, right? It's like water. You can't really control water. We can encourage it to flow in certain ways, but it's a force beyond, our control in the bigger picture, right? We can't control the ocean tidal waves and things like that, but we can learn to ride them, right? It's like surfing a wave. And so when you learn to ride this wave of pleasure within the body, really the key is, to really break it down here, is to be able to I'm actually, dropping a video on this this weekend on Saturday about a very in-depth explanation of how to, experience the non-ejaculatory orgasm. But it's like, you must be at a certain degree of arousal and sexual excitement, but not so much that there's a lot of belief that men have to be right on the edge of ejaculation to have a non-ejaculatory orgasm. That's one way for a limited genital orgasm type experience. But when you're that far, what happens is all this tension is building up in the pelvic floor. And it's actually, once that tension builds up, it locks the sexual energy in that area of your body, because tension blocks the flow of chi within the body. So the big key to non-ejaculatory orgasm is to maintain this degree of sexual excitement and sexual stimulation, but not too much that you're like about to ejaculate and all that pelvic floor tension is building up. So staying relaxed, feeling what's happening in your body, relaxing your mind. This is why there's so many different tools in sexual kung fu. If it was as simple as like, oh, you do this one little technique and you have non-ejaculatory orgasms, then, it'd be easy. I wouldn't have had to make, hundreds of videos on my YouTube channel. But the reality is that as men, especially, we have so many ingrained patterns around sex and around our sexual experience. We have so many blockages, traumas, so many expectations that it's locking you in the experience that you're having now. And it's difficult to do something new because your cup's already full, so to speak. So that's why there's so much preparatory work. Opening up the energy body, clearing out a lot of these rigid, stuck blockages in your body and mind. This is why Qigong is such an important tool, because uh, this is really, one of the whole bases of sexual kung fu training is learning to work with qi, which qigong is. It's energy skill, energy work, and you develop these pathways of qi in the body. You clear up a flow. First of all, it clears out all this tension, all these blockages, all these ingrained unconscious habits and patterns that you've had for most of your life. So it frees you up to change the way you're able to experience, the way you behave, the way that you engage, the way that the energy flows through your body starts to change. And another very important tool of this training, meditation, breathwork, qigong, yogic practices, is that it really develops your sensitivity of your body. Most people cannot feel into their bodies; they're numb. It's like from here down, maybe they're pretty much numb, except maybe their genitals for men too, right? And so, really developing that body awareness and feeling is a very, very important part of this. This is known as Ting Jin uh, the Taoist internal training. Ting Jin is listening energy. It's this ability to feel and listen into what's actually happening. Listening how your body's responding to the environment. This is what Tai Chi masters get really good at, right? They know when someone's attacking before it's even happening. And so when you can't feel your body, when you're just numb and everything's blocked here, obviously you can't have full body orgasms because the space simply isn't open to hold that orgasmic energy, and it's only going to get stuck in the genitals. So opening up the whole body is such an important part of this. And really, the practice of sexual kung fu goes much beyond simply sex itself. Like, that's obviously a big part of it, is sex and sexual orgasm. But the thing is, you can expand this experience of orgasm to something you're having just in your regular day-to-day life. What is orgasm? Again, it's this heightened state of pleasure in your body, your mind, your spirit. It's also this yin yang dynamic. It's polarities balancing and neutralizing each other. And people are so polarized in all aspects of their being. They're stuck in certain patterns, too much yang, not enough yin, or vice versa. And they feel unpleasant throughout the day. People feel stressed out. They feel anxiety. They feel, depression, all these things, right? And when you learn to balance your internal elements, your yin yang energy, the five elemental energies, you learn to be a bit more in tune with what's happening in nature. I mean, if you observe nature, it's perfect. Everything is in balance. There's no too much of anything. There's no too little. Everything changes, these cycles of the seasons. When you learn to observe that, how nature flows and transforms and keeps everything in balance, you start to embody that within yourself by practicing, these ancient, powerful internal technologies, which qigong and yoga are. Then you literally live in bliss and orgasm 24/7. So it goes beyond simply cultivating this idea of having better sex and physical sexual orgasm. Yes, that is an aspect of it. That's an important aspect which a lot of people are interested in. But it's important to understand that you can live in a state of orgasm 24/7. This is what really drew me to practice qigong meditation. Once I learned to open up my energy channels, you feel the sensation of chi flowing through your body, which is quite prevalent when we're kids, when we're young, when we're wide open, we're still very connected to source. We don't have all this conditioning and rigidities, polarities of belief systems, or like, oh, I have to be against what these people believe because I have this belief system. We don't get so heavily polarized. So there's more of this lubrication, we could say, between yin and yang within us. We're not stuck in one aspect of expression. And that, to be in that is that's the sage, right? That's the master level. And it feels amazing. So again, one of the reasons I practice qigong is because it feels orgasmic. You get the channels opening. Once you start to feel the chi tangibly, it feels incredible. Your whole body's vibrating, this like hydraulic radioactive chi flowing through your body. It feels crazy, right? If more people knew what this felt like, they would spend a lot more time doing these types of practices. But we live in this world of distraction, instant gratification. People want to take a pill or watch a 5-second video and have all the problems solved, but it doesn't really work like that. So this is really the way of the ancients. This is the way of the sages, the masters, the yogis, the Taoists, is to overcome the conditioning of society, our parents, our politicians, religious figures, and discover our original nature. Because we all have this direct connection to source. It's where we all came from. And you don't need this person who's above you or between you and source to tell you who you are. It's about you mastering this within yourself, you getting back into your state of original, your source, original, unconditioned self. And that is a very orgasmic space to be in. So again, it's it's transitioning as far as the sexual, I could go on more about this, but as far as the sexual cultivation aspect of things, it's about transitioning from quick fix this quick fix based approach on sexuality, where most people, it's like impulsive. It's like, well, I'm horny, there's a naked body that looks good, I'm just gonna thrust into it. Okay, now I'm orgasming, that feels good. Okay, what's the next thing? I'm hungry now. And then, oh, a few hours later, oh, I'm horny again. That's most people's relationship to their sexual energy. Absolutely unconscious, very animalistic. They're not getting anything out of it. It's depleting them over time, because the more you expend this sexual energy unconsciously, the more you become depleted, the closer to death you become, the more disconnected from your true essence you become. On the other hand, it's transitioning from that impulsive quick fix approach into a deep inner cultivation, giving sex and sexuality and your sexual energy nourishment, cultivating it, approaching it with really the sacredness that it is. It's a sacred act. It's this internal technology we have that we can use to heal ourselves, to heal our partners, to generate tremendous amounts of energy and channel that into other things. That's what our sex drive, I believe, is really for. Is, again, it's a healing, empowering, endless source of creative energy. And it's been a little bit distorted for the human race, but I'm here to help fix that as much as I can. And once you do this work, you change this relationship. You live in orgasmic bliss, whether or not you're actually physically having sex. You're balancing these internal yin yang energies within your body. You tap into that your cells are all reproducing 24/7, having sex, having orgasms. That's what's creating your physical longevity, is the reproductions of your cells. It's a sexual process. When you resonate with that, you live in this bliss. You don't become so interested in, like, oh, I need to argue with people on the internet and do all these weird things people are doing these days. You want to, like, sit out in the trees and just observe the beauty of the world and be like, oh, this is what it feels like to be in my center. I remember what it's like to just be in this pure state of observation and enjoyment and connect with the elements, not in like a weird problem solving uh, bigotry mode, right? So there you go, guys. Cultivate your sexual energy, expand your orgasmic potential. And if you guys want to get started, uh, having a practice is the number one thing. We can talk about the stuff all day, and you can listen to the stuff all day. It's great. It's, maybe get a little bit inspired, but if you don't have a practice, it's just in one ear out the other. Next week, you're like, oh, I watched this video. It was really good. I forgot what he was talking about. Oh, what's on the social media now? So have a practice where you're actually developing your relationship to this within you. Otherwise, it's just talk and nothing happens. Talk does not cook the rice. So go check out my Qigong playlist on my YouTube channel. I have a Qigong playlist. The number one exercise I recommend to do is Qigong, balance your Qi. It's a self-healing, self-energy healing practice. I also have a sexual Kung Fu exercises playlist. That's a lot of the practices to develop this connection with your sexual energy. Boom. And with that, I'm going to answer some questions. So feel free to type in your questions, guys. And thanks for joining. It's always good to hang out with you guys. Nasher says, I think it's pronounced Satipatthana meditation. It builds energy as well. I'm wondering if it's going to get in the way of the Dantian breathing and microcosmic orbit. So my understanding is that this is basically mindfulness practice. It's a pretty, basic meditation practice. And I wouldn't say it's going to get in the way, but unless, it's a different practice than, I know there's a lot of ways of doing this type of practice. It's kind of a vague thing to say that. So I'm not exactly sure what your practice entails, but overall, I don't think it's going to get in the way. Like, if you're doing all these different practices, you're doing all of them together, that's great. But it's not going to give you, this practice won't replace Dantian breathing or microcosmic orbit. They're going to be different things. I hope that's helpful. Mary Haley XO says, why do we attract women on semen retention? What's the spiritual side of it? Well, I would put it this way. It's like, what do you think is going to be more attractive? A person has these weird addictive habits in their life. They're depleting their life force. They're sending their energy down the drain, attracting weird stuff from the astral plane because they're jerking off to porn every day, just completely unconscious. That's a person who's in depletion. It's like their battery's low 24/7. Versus someone who's cultivating themselves, has the self-love and self-respect to respect their sexual energy and its power, not just waste it, that person's going to have a lot more just energy, more kidney energy, more vital essence. So on a physiological level, your hormones are better. You're going to be exuding more pheromones, which they pick up. That's more just gene level, basic physical attraction. On a spiritual level, you're probably going to be a bit more inclined to just be a little bit of a more conscious person. Your polarity is stronger because, again, when you practice semen retention, you have more masculine energy. Your testosterone is improved. You're not wasting it and in that, depletion mode. So you're creating a stronger yang to their yin. And that creates, attraction is based on polarities. The stronger the polarity is, the more the attraction is going to be. And the spiritual levels, spiritual attraction is more of like you're attracted to their spirituality, how they are spiritually, their connection with the spiritual plane. Someone's doing this work, doing spiritual, development, then someone else who's in that kind of state will be attracted to that as well. That's the Shen level of attraction, right? There's these 3 different levels of attraction. Jing, Qin, Shen. I made a video about this. Most people, it's only physical attraction. It's just the Jing level, a little bit of Qi too. Kdu7 says, sexual kung fu, does spreading the truth be dangerous for you? I don't think I'm really talking about things that are really highly. I mean, it's obviously sexuality and like the porn industry is a big kind of noose around the neck of humanity, but I'm not really threatening that. I think it'd be one thing if I was like, I'm fighting the porn industry. We're going to take this thing down. But that's my thing isn't like, I don't want to be in a war with anyone. I'm not really saying like, this industry has stopped. They're my enemy or something like that. I'm not really in the polarity battle so much. So I don't think I'm a huge threat to anyone. Obviously, I'm helping people become very, very empowered, which, maybe that's a threat to some people. I don't know. I don't think I'm really at a, high up on the list of people to take out, but who knows? If I disappear, you'll know what happened. That or I transcended to the spiritual realm, but probably not. And I think the real truth is that it's very likely that the masses of humanity are not going to be committed to doing this work. Sexual kung fu is something that requires tremendous discipline, it's time and effort. Kung fu is time, effort spent training. And most of humanity is becoming just a bit lazy, very focused on instant gratification. Not to sound cynical, but it's simply true. Like the average human is not going to take the time and effort to really do this work and master the highest level. So it's a pretty, uncommon relative thing, I would say. Lucius, what's up, Lucius? Says, how to quickly recover after caffeine ingestion for 2 to 3 months. Small amounts of cacao multiple times daily. Okay, so basically, if you've like kind of burned your adrenals through caffeine, how to recover from that? Build your kidney energy. More rest, stillness, calming the mind. The mind is one of the most important things. This is the thing I keep remembering and learning is that you can be doing all these things, but if you're stressed out, your mind's super, super busy, just thinking all the time, that's burning up your kidney energy as well. So calming the mind, calming the body, more rest, healthy amount of exercise, but not, too much exercise that you're unable to properly recover. Qigong is amazing for building the adrenals and the kidneys. The grounding practices, Jianzhuang, amazing for the kidney energy. Tonic herbs that build the kidney system. Ashwagandha is great. Shou Wu formulation by Dragon Herbs. You want a good kidney yin building formula. That's a great one. Get all your minerals, zinc, magnesium, boron, selenium, and just rest. Take it easy and you'll recover. Practice meditation, stillness. Ultimate Liberation says, can you explain a bit of Dantian? Okay, so the Dantian is an energetic center in the belly. It's not a chakra. It's not, it's different than the chakra system. People are always asking if the Dantian is the second chakra. It's not. It does, we could say, relate energetically to the lower 3 chakras, but it's something different entirely. It is basically a field. It's a field and a container, possibly a portal as well, that kind of source energy is coming in and out of the body. There's different alchemical explanations, different, physiological explanations of the Dantian. But from my experience, it is basically it's where you store chi, and you have to create it with practice. It's not something that everyone has. Maybe it's there when we're born, but we lose our Dantian as we kind of scatter our energy all over the place. So you have to build the Dantian requires stillness. You can't, there's a lot of practices where you're kind of like trying to force energy into it. There's like the chi packing and stuff like that. It will bring yang chi down there, but without a container, without the yin magnetic field, it disperses pretty quickly. That's what I discovered. So Dantian practice, there's the Dantian breathing video I have on YouTube. That in combination with stillness, just sitting, completely stilling the mind, holding the awareness in that space gently, it starts to create this yin chi is like magnetic fields. It's like fields of energy, whereas yang chi is like the electrical current moving through these forms. So you form the yin field. It's like creating the container. And once that container is in place, once you have that yin field of the Dantian, you're able to then fill it with the yang qi, which is like, it's like filling a bucket with water. And it takes a while to do this. It takes years, right? But you'll start feeling the Dantian pretty quickly. And so basically, this is kind of the first step. It's an important foundation in real in-depth energy cultivation. You don't need to really work, too intense with the Dantian if you're just like trying to do the basics of sexual kung fu, have the non-ejaculatory orgasm, stuff like that. But if you're serious about energy cultivation, it's a very important foundation, especially in Qigong. It basically becomes your battery, right? And the more yang Qi you have, the more efficient your Qi practice becomes, especially if you're working with a microcosmic orbit. If you don't have the Dantian developed, then you simply don't have as much current to run through the orbit. You're still running it, it's fine. You just don't quite have the voltage to where it's going to be like the tangible electrical experience that it becomes. So the more you build the Dantian, the more efficient all the other energetic practices become. And it's there because you feel it. When I focus on the Dantian, it feels like this bubbling hot radioactive like beehive in my belly. This is why I think it's referred to the cauldron, as a cauldron in the Taoist internal alchemical text. They talk about it as the the cauldron. Dantian means elixir field, the field that holds the elixir. The elixir is what you attain over years and years of cultivation. All these energies you combine together in this space, cook them down to form this single energy, also called the pill. And, that's some of the alchemical process of the Dantian. But basically, it's your energy battery. And without one, if you're doing Qigong, it's going to be very limited. Sepe says, Johnathan, what do you do when you are sad? Well, I allow myself to feel it. I don't try to like shut down or avoid it or pack it away. I simply allow myself to feel it. There's various practices I do to kind of, we could say, digest emotions and allow them to reach a state of completion. Recently, my uncle died a few weeks ago. There's a death in the family, and it was just an unexpected. It was difficult for the family in a lot of ways, but it's just like it's part of life. So it's like, and I feel all these experiences are just ways to learn. We can either let the difficult experiences of life weigh us down. We can hold on to things and become angry and depressed and like, let it shut us down. Or you can allow it to be, be grateful for what it is you do have. This is the whole thing. We live in the realm of polarity. It's like we only experience things as good because there's bad in relation to that, right? So we're always labeling things like that's good. I need more good. The bad things are bad. I need to fight the bad. And we get stuck in this polarity battle again. We're stuck in this loop of being in a battle, right? So the more you can just allow what is and be okay with that, right? Obviously it's easy to say, but this is kind of the profoundness of really having a deep meditation practice and being okay with both gain and loss, and not trying to see one as more important than the other, but you can sit in more of a neutral space, simply smile to yourself. This is what the inner smile is all about, is accepting what is and not trying to change it, not trying to fight it, and allow yourself to feel what you're feeling fully so it can be fully processed through your space. And I think going for like a walk in the woods, going on a little, actually, I just had a retreat this last weekend. I rented this Airbnb out in nature, this beautiful Canyonlands, a couple hours from where I live. It was really amazing. Did a ton of practice, went deep. There was the lunar eclipse, the full moon eclipse, is a powerful time for manifestation, and had an absolutely amazing just transformation of myself over the weekend, doing all these practices and just having a little solo retreat, and it was phenomenal. And I've just been in a really good flow since then. Lucius Lushinsky says, I found that energy can be depleted by many things, not only porn or masturbation, but also caffeine and alcohol and sugary stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's many, many ways that we scatter our gene. The most common one for men is excessive ejaculation because it's so easy and tempting, but poor diet, stimulants, drugs in general, anything that puts you into a high state burns up your gene in as a trade-off, right? Too much thinking, too much working, not enough rest, basically too much action in general, too excess yang burns up our energy. So yeah, there's many, many ways. That's why sexual kung fu and just in general health, it's not just about like, a lot of guys get really obsessed with semen retention, like that's the answer to everything. Like why am I having negative emotions and I'm tired? I'm practicing semen retention. It's like, okay, well, how's your diet? Do you meditate? Do you do qigong? Do you do yoga? Do you exercise? Like, no, I just do semen retention. It's like, okay, well, that's just one piece of this whole, you know, puzzle. So it's a holistic thing. Tina says, hello. Hey, Tina. Are you familiar with the gateway experience or brain hemisphere synchronicity? As always, thanks for what you do. I have not heard of the gateway experience. Brain hemisphere synchronicity. I'm not sure if that's like a specific practice or like, certain thing. I'm not sure if that's just like balancing brain states or what. So I can't really comment too much on that, but I do know some cool practices for quickly bringing your brain hemispheres into balance. One is alternate nostril breathing. Breathe in the left nostril, exhale out the right, breathe in the right, exhale out the left. Basic pranayama practice. You can also work with the left and right core channels when you do that, like breathe down the side channel, up, out that channel, these lunar solar circuits. Yeah. Jim Boat says, how do vasectomy affect one's Jing and Qigong practice? It's a great question. And my answer here is going to be limited because I have not had a vasectomy, and I've only heard so much about this within the space of energy cultivation. It does not seem to have a profound effect one way or the other in that obviously you're naturally practicing semen retention and, for the rest of your life pretty much when you have a vasectomy. But the interesting thing is that the ejaculatory type of orgasm, because you still have, the same ejaculation experience, fluid comes out because there's just no sperm in it, but it's the seminal fluid produced by the other glands and ducts of the body, or the ducts that it travels through. And it's the same refractory period, the same changes in hormones. So if you've had a vasectomy or not, I would say it's worth practicing sexual kung fu in just the same way, managing your ejaculatory orgasms, transitioning more into primarily the non-ejaculatory type of experience. But it'd be interesting to see more kind of I don't know, studies. I mean, it's hard to scientifically study like your gene levels and things like that. It's beyond the tools of science currently. So it's an interesting thing, and I only know so much about this topic. B says, hey bro, when retaining but practicing sexual kung fu, how do you circulate the energy when finished? What practices do you do after? Power lock. You can bring it to the organs, the glands, the brain. Microcosmic orbit. My partner and I will pretty much always finish with just an exchange of energy between us, where you fuse your orbits together, you fuse your energy channels together, and you run it between them. And this kind of circulates the energy between you. Sometimes I do an alchemical breathing practice, kind of cook the energy in the dantian, all kinds of things. But if you're like, you need to get the energy out of your genitals, the power lock is a very simple way to do this. I have a basic power lock technique I teach on here on YouTube. Just look up sexual kung fu power lock. That draws the energy out. You can also use the Tesco breathing, but there's more, we could say, potent power locks I teach in the 12-week course to bring it to the organs, the glands, the different energy channels, to really just distribute it through the whole body. As far as practices to do after, I might do the healing sounds to disperse energy. Here's a great one to do. It's a he sound. So you bring the arms up, just feel like you're a clear tube. You're just moving your awareness through your body, sweeping down through your feet. Like you're clearing out any excessive heat. Do that several times. Sometimes I do Dantian practices, microcosmic orbit, all kinds of practices I'll do after the sexual cultivation. Okay, Liar Liar one says, holding my breath for a short time seems to keep me calm. Is this something you have any experience with? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, pranayama breathing techniques where you do breath subjugation, hold the breath out, or breath retention, you hold the breath in, and it can cause, a change in the nervous system. Yeah, so if it works for you, that's great. Deep breathing with the breath, holding the breath out and holding the breath in, things like that can, I mean, deep breathing in general is good for the nervous system. Okay, Lara also asks, could butterflies in the stomach be chi? It could be, or it could simply be butterflies in the stomach. Depends on the context. Like if you're working with a Dantian, you will often have sensations that can feel similar to that. I've had that type of like floaty, energetic. Sometimes there's like a cramping that happens, like this, physical things can happen when you're working with the Dantian. So it could be, it could be chi, or it could just be, butterflies in the stomach. It's difficult to say on the context there. Sepe says, I'm really passionate about human energy. Do you know if there are any official institutes researching human energy? I would love to make this my job. Yeah, I think there's several. Something that comes to mind is I think it's the Heart Math Institute. They really measure like the heart, especially like the magnetic field of the heart and its power. So, the little research there, I'm sure you could find something. One of the things though is that a lot of the research I've seen on this stuff is very, very superficial. I mean, in China, for a while they were becoming very interested in qigong and the phenomenon of qi, and they were trying to like measure, they would measure qigong masters, and they found like, heat coming out of their laogong point. They measured like infrared, um, all these different frequencies, spectrums of light coming out, but that's still like a limited. There's just like that's still not the chi itself, right? That's just certain manifestations of it, right? So our tools are limited really in what we can measure, I would say, from what I've seen anyway. But it's definitely an interesting thing. I'm always interested in like the science of what's actually happening there. Maybe someday the science will catch up with what the ancient mystics knew. Ember says, as a woman, is there a way to share your channel or work with a man without it being weird or being misinterpreted? LOL. That's a good question. I've had a lot of women ask me about that. And I'm trying to think because I know guys can be a bit, I don't know, make like, without the feeling of like, oh, there's something wrong with you. This guy's got this thing better. Guys can be really like weird like that about that stuff. So it's difficult to say. But something you could say is like, hey, I'm into tantra. That's I think that's a word that's uh, intriguing for a lot of people, and like sacred sexuality, and like there's this whole practice you can do of like having this much higher experience of orgasm, and like if you learn more about this, this guy's channel, or there's some books, you can get the Multi-Orgasmic Man book by Montauk Chi, or some of his other books, things like that, as a kind of a starting point introduction to this whole world. So, I'm not entirely sure. I'll I have a video specifically for. So your woman has sent you to this video. Here's a few things you need to know. But I mean, the thing is like some people will be open to it, some people won't, and everyone has free will. So it's for some guys and it's not for some guys. Kdu7 says, is it possible to really retain for months as a beginner, get deeply anxious, I can't sleep, and stop overthinking at times? Is the dopamine levels or reboot phase? It may not be relation to your dopamine. Usually what happens is like your dopamine's low and you feel really you have like addictive habits, and you have a hard time focusing, you're a little scattered, you feel a little low, but that usually doesn't last like ridiculous periods of time. And something that happens, it's very, there's a lot of there's a lot of lack of understanding about this stuff, especially in the semen retention community. It's just like, oh, just retain your semen, as long as you can, everything will be fine after a while. But the truth is that you have to understand you're building yang qi, you're building this powerful fiery energy within you, especially if you're used to releasing it. And this energy by itself is not inherently more useful to you. It simply feeds the patterns that are already in place. It amplifies. That's what sexual energy does. It amplifies and it binds to things. So if you're not doing underlying work to kind of clear out your psyche, clear out your energy body, change your thinking patterns, your habits and things like that, and you're simply retaining your semen, you're just like pouring more gasoline on the fire and you can have serious imbalances. This is why I don't recommend like you just do semen retention without any internal skill cultivating your energy. You can have problems. Like you said, you can have insomnia. It can exacerbate anxiety and things like that. So it's important to understand, my approach is different than like what a lot of the NoFap and other semen retention guys do, where it's just like, yep, just retain your semen. That's it. Go to the gym and retain your semen. Yeah, it works great for some men, but again, if you have like certain physiological conditions and things like that, it can just exacerbate it as the yang qi builds up. So it's essential that you're at the very least doing like breathwork practices. Working with the microcosmic orbit is I would say a foundation to do semen retention successfully. Otherwise, yeah, it can just literally make you go crazy. So be careful. Derek Trevino says, can you do too much SKF training? I literally live this now as an MOM, multi-orgasmic man graduate. I practice various things from the course all day, every day, throughout the day, and I feel great. But sometimes I feel like I get really spacey. LOL, is that an indication I'm doing too many practices? So the thing to understand is that every practice has a specific effect on your body. Some practices will be more yang and kind of like causing the energy to ascend upwards. Some practices will be more yin and more grounding. So balancing that is really, I would say, what you would want to focus on, right? You can definitely do too much of some practices, too much bringing the energy up, too much like forceful breath work. Transformational breath work is not something I would recommend doing regularly, like every day. So basically, if you're getting spacey, you need more grounding. Maybe you're not quite able to hold some of the energy you're calling upon, right? Stimulating in your practice. Just more grounding, go deeper into the grounding practice, spend time just laying on the ground. So you want to balance yin and yang. And I've gone through these phases as well, where like I'm really, really obsessively practicing, like, oh, every moment of the day I've got to be running my orbit and things like that. And I think maybe something that's helpful is that it's important to equalize your practice between clearing practices, building energy practices, and circulation practice. Clearing is 6 healing sounds. It's some of the breath work. The inner smile helps to release the excess heat, excess whatever, toxicity, emotions. Because if you're doing tons of qigong, you can build all this heat. And for some people, they literally cook themselves. You can do too much of some of the yang qi practices. So make sure you're emphasizing the clearing practices, and then too much clearing, too much circulating also will kind of thin out your qi. You may feel a bit spacey, ungrounded from that. So too much circulation, like too much running the orbit, too much, moving the energy. That's why building, which is kind of stillness practice, right? The Dantian building, the Zhan Zhuang, which really has everything in that. There's clearing, building, and circulating in that. But just balancing these levels, and I think you'll be fine. If you get too spacey, just, do something a little more grounding. That's why I like to kind of cross-train energetic practices with very physical exercise. I like to go to the gym, lift weights, do squats, do kettlebells, lift weights, do cardio, hit the elliptical. And it really helps me stay grounded from all the energy work that I'm doing, because I've had a tendency to blast off at various times too. One thing that's been huge for me is cultivating calmness, stillness. If you're doing your practice with a very busy mind, when your yi is too strong, your intention, you're using a little bit too much force in your practice. Like, oh, I got to drive this energy. You got to do this and do that. It really makes the energy rise up. I've discovered this, right? I was having trouble sleeping for a while. It wasn't really, I would say, specifically because of my practice, but it was just too much busyness in my mind. It was making me very spacey as well. So learning to really still the mind, anchoring the breath low in the body with the abdominal breathing is huge. And just in general, having more calmness in your life, you're able to hold more when you're more grounded, just like that slow kind of earth chi movement. But, good job on really crushing the practice. That's what it's all about. Rendell Frank says, how do you think the practices you do would help one who is starting a new chapter in their life and breaking old bonds? I think it's immensely helpful. I mean, this is really exactly what I was going through as I started training in this work. Was it's this transition into becoming someone else, and changing your identity, changing your habits. It can be a very difficult thing, especially if you're in the same kind of living situation. You're in the same space and everything, and you're trying to let go of these old habits. A huge part of this is changing the dynamic of how the energy flows in your body. We have these energy channel systems, and when a certain it's like when our energies get stuck flowing in a certain way, it's you can think of like waters, like you've created a certain pathway for the water to flow, and it flows in that same way year after year, day after day. It can be hard for it to move anywhere else. So what you're doing with these energetic practices is you're opening up more pathways, we could say. You're allowing that water to permeate in different directions than were possible before. So you're clearing these certain blockages, these rigidities that you have to only have certain behavioral patterns. And it really allows you to dramatically shift your behaviors, your thought patterns, your emotions, everything you can transform with these practices. So I think it's extremely helpful in this regard. Okay, CJP says I started taking steroids for MMA and my natural testosterone and sperm production shut down. How will it affect semen retention and the benefits? Yeah, first of all, I don't recommend steroids. They can completely destroy your endocrine system over time. It's kind of like the short-term kind of gratification with long-term serious damage often. So how will it affect semen retention and the benefits? I mean, again, your testosterone will, while you're taking the steroids, you'll feel, but in the long term, it can damage your endocrine system. Again, over time, your ability to produce sperm without having to take steroids, again, will become damaged. In the long run, your testosterone can be completely jacked from that. So it can have some very negative and dangerous effects. I don't recommend doing these things. You don't need steroids. There's natural ways to really maximize everything. It takes a bit more patience, a bit more work, and things like that. So, be careful. Mamba Med says, what books do you read for sexual kung fu? There's some good books. I would say most of what I've learned is beyond, what I've seen in books, just, studying directly with teachers and things like that. But some good ones I recommend. Multi-Orgasmic Man by Montauk Chi is it's kind of the most simple, even though the techniques I don't really recommend. It's like squeeze your pelvic floor really, really hard every day. I wrecked my pelvic floor doing that. So, but some of the information in that book is interesting. I think Taoist Secrets of Love, Cultivating Male Sexual Energy by Montauk Chi and Michael Wynn is a better book, and that it's kind of the more bigger picture of energy cultivation and things like that. So I think that's a great one. There's a book by Stephen Chang called Taoist Sexology. That's another great one as well. I made a video on this. Just look at my top 5 books on sexual kung fu. Andrew Bradley says, how to cure delayed ejaculation. I have no sensation when I'm inside a woman, and it's no fun when you're going 30 minutes and you're exhausted. So delayed ejaculation, this is something I don't have as much experience with, as I've never experienced it myself, at least not like, where I didn't want it, like it was a problem. But I think that it has to do, it can be various factors. It could be trauma, sexual trauma, feeling shame around this area of your body, like you are literally unable to embody the space of your body, unable to embody this part, your genitals. So your consciousness like withdraws from this area. You have no sensation. It could be damage from something, physical damage there. If you had an accident or something, some nerve damage or something. There's a lot of factors to it, right? So it's difficult to say exactly what's causing it, but something that creates more sensation. I mean, it's funny. This is going to be the opposite advice what I usually give to men, but this is a unique situation. You could experiment with, well, first of all, feeling that space of your body. Learn to just sit and feel into that space. Bring your mind into it. Simply create a little stimulation. Just kind of touch it with your finger, massage it a little bit, and just focus on creating more feeling in that area. It could also be from you said no sensation when you're inside a woman. Is it only when you're inside a woman, or is it just in general? So it could be, again, maybe you had a past relationship, a traumatic sexual experience or something with a partner. So you just felt like it's not safe for me to be inside of a woman, something around that. Maybe you got hurt or something, right? So it could be psychological, could be very psychological, energetic, and it could be something physiological. So, I don't know a lot about the whole context of the situation, but um, with that, hopefully it's helpful. And what I was saying, this is the opposite of what I usually recommend for men, but try squeezing your pelvic floor muscles as you stimulate your penis and see if it gives you more sensation, because that kind of triggers the sympathetic nervous system, more of the ejaculatory type of response. So you could try that and see how you feel doing a Kegel while stimulating your penis, but don't get too crazy with it so that it starts to create premature ejaculation over time with excessive tension. I hope that's helpful. Okay, Arjun says, his first question is Dantian breathing, microcosmic orbit, and testicle breathing the most basic starting point for semen retention? What else would you recommend? Those are great practices to do. One, I would also recommend Qigong, like standing movement Qigong, because all of those are kind of sitting Neigong practices. You're just kind of using your mind to do it. And when you have a Qigong practice, it really helps you get more in your body and deepen your experience of Qi. So a really great one is Zhuang Qigong. Look up standing meditation, Qigong, my YouTube channel. That is really, really great as well. Helps you to ground that sexual energy so you can hold a higher charge without kind of getting overheated. But any of the Qigong routines I have in my Qigong playlist are very, very helpful as well. So all those are great practices, but I recommend doing Qigong as well. It's a movement, moving the Qi through the body. Royal Calvin says, is sex magic the ultimate energy to manifest whatever you want? Well, sexual energy in general is definitely, it is the force of creation, and it's what we create. It's what we were created with, and we do use it to create as well. And we can really tap into that. It takes everything to another level. I've made several videos about this. Arjun says, for the microcosmic orbit, can you explain the breathing? Well, it depends on the technique you're using. First of all, you don't have to worry about it too much. There's one of the videos I made on this where you basically you inhale into one of the points, and then you move your mind to the next point of the orbit. As you exhale, inhale into that point, exhale as you move the mind to the next point. It's a bit more of a busy mental practice, but it's a cool way to run the orbit as well. So, but as far as the most recent one I made, you're simply focusing on the point with relaxed awareness, and you don't worry about your breathing. Just let it be natural, assuming you have good kind of breathing. That's kind of a whole different training of the Neigong type of breathing, which is simply observing your breath through the nostrils, moving the awareness of where you're feeling the breath lower and lower, and it will naturally bring your breath into the Dantian space. I teach this in my courses, but don't worry about the breathing too much. Just abdominal breathing is fine. There's a lot of techniques where it's or a lot of systems that say you must inhale as you bring the energy up the back, you must exhale as you bring energy down the body, or vice versa. You must inhale, bringing it down the body, exhale, bringing it up. And it honestly doesn't matter. I've tried both. I've tried holding my breath and running the orbit. I've tried not focusing on the breath at all, running the orbit. It all works. One of the things that really unlocks the orbit is building enough Qi in your Dantian, which takes a while. It can take years. And the third question is, how do I know if I'm doing the microcosmic orbit right? Well, if you're working with the practices, not using too much mental force, this is something that happens a lot, is people use too much force, too strong intention, too much yi. And it creates too much of this mental energy, and the energy kind of gets stuck in your head. You get a headache, and you just feel kind of frustrated. So really, really relaxed focus is important, right? But in general, you're working with the orbit, the flow of energy in it, focusing on the points, whatever method you're working, you're doing it right. It's hard to really go wrong with it unless you're doing, something really weird. Sepe says, I have used anti-psychosis meditation in the past, but I feel like Zhuang has the same effect and only benefits, no bad sides that meds have. Thank you for sharing all these practices. Yeah, that's a fantastic testimonial to this. This is the whole thing. I don't want to rant too much on this, but the whole pharmacological system it's not great, we'll say. In the early 1900s, do we want to get into this right now? Basically, though, in the early 1900s, some major changes came. The big giants, the medical industry, made it illegal for doctors to basically do anything other than prescribing drugs to people, right? And all these drugs are originally derived from plants, but plants are they have compounds of chemicals, natural chemicals in them that balance each other out. But with these pharmaceutical drugs, they take one of the compounds, isolate it, extract it. Sometimes it's synthesized entirely. So you get all these gnarly side effects because there's no the other natural compounds that would balance the thing out. So, I mean, one of the main causes of death in the US is drugs, side effects, overdoses, or just, I mean, you watch these drug commercials, these prescription drug commercials, and it's like the side effects are insane. It's like may cause death. It's like, okay, well, that's great. Anyways, we don't need these things, right? This is what I mean, when you can keep your body and your mind healthy, eat a reasonably healthy diet, exercise, I mean, walk at the very least, drink water, stay hydrated, don't stress your mind so much. Qigong, especially, is a miracle exercise. I mean, they had entire hospitals in China back in the 80s, maybe 70s, 80s, 90s, sometime in there, where all they were doing was Qigong. If you came to the doctor and you had something acute, a minor kind of issue, they would give you a drug, they'd give you Western medicine, right? If you had something chronic, a chronic disease, they would send you to the Qigong clinic, be like, all right. And they had very high success rates. One of the, there's a few books I've read on Zhuang where they literally, doctors were studying this practice and the effects it had on it. It was highly successful for heart issues, insomnia, hypertension, digestive disorders. And again, no side effects. Whereas pharmaceutical drugs, you're almost guaranteed to have side effects, and they're often not even, they're not that effective. So anyways, we don't need, the the billionaire drug industry. We don't need it. It's kind of the irony of the great joke is that the real remedies cost pennies, and that's the world we're in. But it's all right. It's kind of always been like this. A few weirdos taking control of things and pushing everyone else down, and then it all collapses eventually. Do Qigong. It'll be great. But yeah, so I heard something else. Someone who went through my course, and I forget what exactly their condition was. I think it was obsessive compulsive disorder, or ADD, and Zhuang just dramatically helped them with it. And this is all, you get your energy in balance, you feel good. Everything comes into balance. B says, "Hey bro, what do you think of the wake back to bed lucid dreaming technique?" It's the technique I've had the most success with. Almost like guaranteed to have a lucid dream when I use this technique. What did you do to get what did you do to get the what results? Lucid dreaming? Maybe the best results? Again, yeah, using this technique, which is basically I feel like I've talked about this a lot of lives when people ask about this, but it's lucid dreaming is phenomenal. I just had a lucid dream last night. I was in this dream where I was like, I had appointment, I had like a massage appointment, and then I walked in the door to this place, and all of a sudden I'm like out on this farm in the country. I'm like, oh, I'm at the wrong place. I gotta walk. And then eventually I'm like, okay, this is actually really bizarre. Like maybe I'm dreaming. And I do the checks. I'm like, yeah, I'm dreaming. And then, the first thing I usually do when I become lucid is fly, because when you're lucid in a dream, if it's just as real feeling as this reality, except for things like bending and morphing, like you're on psychedelics or something. It's, if you haven't experienced lucid dream, it's insane. It's crazy. It's amazing. You're like Neo in the Matrix. So the first thing I do is fly, and sometimes it's a little awkward. Like I remember when I was first learning to fly in lucid dreams, I was like trying to swim through the air, moving really slowly, and then I figured out how to just like blast off. But last night I was like, as soon as I thought fly, just boom, I shot up. Like it was intense how fast I was moving, and I tried to make it through the atmosphere. I've never been able to in my lucid dreams. I hit this like barrier, and I go into this weird dark void. And anyways. But yeah, the wake back to bed technique is the one I've had the most success with. So you sleep, get a good, for me, usually at least like 5 hours of sleep, set an alarm, wake up. I like to just read a book about lucid dreaming because it really puts me in that state. Have it very clear what you're going to do when you become lucid. Have your plan, what you're going to do. Otherwise, you just get distracted and kind of go back into a sleep mode, and, works well. Another thing, this is very interesting. This is from a dream practice, Taoist dream practice I learned is when you're going to sleep. I'm about to lose my Instagram feed, so I'll pull it right back up. Okay, I'll be right back up on Instagram here. I'll grab a drink of water. Then I'll talk about another technique, which is pretty cool. So, right as you're going to sleep, this kind of lucid dreaming technique, it's a bit more. It's a bit more difficult. It's if you're well practiced in meditation, it's a bit easier. But basically, as you're drifting onto sleep, you're shifting from your day self to your night self, right? You're shifting into the yin. You're dropping into that deep dark void of the sleep state. But there's this kind of twilight zone. I think it's when you're going into theta state, right? Where you're drifting off. You feel that kind of drift off. Your thoughts are kind of just slowing down, dropping off. But right at that point of drifting off into kind of the deep end is when you set your intention. It's like a sleep request or sleep command, right? And at that point when you're kind of dropping into the void, it's basically like the point where you're last have consciousness before you drop into deep sleep. And it's a tricky space. It's kind of a magic point right there. It's best to practice during the day, like just laying down, taking like a little power nap and just practicing staying conscious, going into those deeper theta states. But basically, right at that point, you set your command. And you like, okay, I'm lucid in my dream, like present moment, like I'm lucid in my dream, or I'm getting an incredibly efficient night of sleep, or I'm waking up at this time, some sort of command right at that point when you're about to drop off into deep sleep. You're still just a little bit conscious. You make it there, and it like transfers to your night self, your dreaming self, and that can work as well. Derek Trevino says, thanks, brother. Definitely often have a busy mind throughout the day. That's probably a big reason. Got to learn how to calm the monkey mind better. It's tricky. That's what I've been really, really focusing on is keeping my mind, my mind very calm throughout the day. Because you notice like all these thoughts come up, or especially like, I don't know, we live in kind of a triggering period on the earth. People are always pissed off and finding things to be angry at each other about, right? So it's easy to like get into these kind of stories people have, and your mind just gets really, really busy. I realized I was doing this for months, like really, really getting into these busy, just mental monkey mind states. So I've really been practicing just a very quiet mind, pure presence. Spending a lot of time, going on nature walks really helps me get back into that flow, and then I just maintain it throughout my day as much as I can. Dropping the breath low, natural abdominal breathing is great for that as well. Okay, Kadim Tilla says, how do I practice non-ejaculatory orgasm through self-pleasure without draining my energy, and how often should I be practicing? Well, how often? It depends. For a lot of guys, you could do it every day if you really wanted, but I recommend doing it like I think every other day because you give yourself a bit of an integration period there. I would say at least a few times a week if you're really serious about it. You want to be consistently, but you don't want to overdo it too, right? So don't be too obsessive about it. But I mean, basically, I've got again, I got a great video dropping on Saturday about this. I think you'll find it helpful. But basically, focus on staying completely relaxed in your mind, in your body, as you're at the levels of arousal. Once maybe in the beginning you need a bit of like fantasy or something just to get aroused, but once you are aroused, completely drop into a feeling state. Notice what you're feeling and completely relax the pelvic floor. Just feel your body deeply and just see how much you can relax into that pleasure that you're feeling. And don't get too like repetitive with the type of stimulation you're using, right? Like a lot of guys just tend to just like hammer it with that and overstimulate themselves. Move more slowly. Just be very mindful of every little sensation that's happening. It's really just a relaxing more into that. And as the arousal and the sexual excitement builds, you focus on relaxing more and more. And don't get too close to that point of ejaculating. Like if you start to feel the pelvic floor tense up, like ejaculation's near, stop and relax again and keep that that relaxation, the deep breathing, using a bit of sound to move the energy. You can draw the energy through the orbit as well. That's a great way to practice it. Harshvardhan, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, says, how should we do both the methods, the microcosmic orbit activation method and testicle breathing, or is only one sufficient because I have less time? Okay. Oh, then the other question, because I have less. Okay. Also, is Dantian training important to be followed before following these? And after following all of the above, should we add Qigong also to our routine? They take so much time. I don't want to experience Qi and all, so tell me the important techniques to be followed into it. You don't want to experience Qi and all. Okay, so as far as which practice to do and like the sequence of training, it depends what your goals are. Are you wanting to be able to move sexual energy through your body? Are you wanting to be able to have non-ejaculatory orgasms? Are you wanting to get really deep into energy cultivation? It depends. I will say the classical prescription, the classical kind of training sequence is first you just work with the Dantian. Start building the energy there, get the Dantian developed, and then you'll have more juice to run through your orbit. And then you start to work with the microcosmic orbit to distribute that chi you've built up in the Dantian throughout your body. And then once you've gotten good at that, then you can work in moving your sexual energy through the orbit, right? So Dantian breathing, then microcosmic orbit, and then the testicle breathing. But again, there's other systems as well that start with a microcosmic orbit. I did the microcosmic orbit for years before I learned how to really develop the Dantian. So it depends what your goals are, I would say. If you're interested more in just the like sexual cultivation, moving the sexual energy, I would say, you don't need to do too much of the Dantian breathing. The Dantian breathing just gives you more juice to run through the orbit and makes it more efficient, right? So if you want like the really tangible energy experience, do Dantian breathing for years, really, and it will really amp up the orbit. But just working with the orbit alone, I recommend just doing the regular microcosmic orbit practice till you get familiar with that pathway. And when you feel like you're ready, then do the testicle breathing. And you'll kind of have that clear pathway. And yeah, and that can become your primary microcosmic orbit practice, the testicle breathing, basically, because you're moving your Jing Qi, your sexual energy, through that orbit. And keep doing Dantian breathing if you're really, really serious about building energy overall. And as far as adding Qigong, you can do it simultaneously. It's good to do Qigong from the beginning because it gives you kind of a more grounded, feeling in your body. And it kind of supports the Neigong side of things where you're just sitting doing the practices. So I hope that that's helpful. John Mao says, do you recommend tantric massage professional practitioners? It depends. This stuff, the lines can be pretty blurred with this kind of stuff where tantric massage, it can get a little weird, right? And this is why being very, very clear about what you're really after, what your practice is as well, and kind of, reading the energy. I've seen a lot of perverts in the tantra scene. I lived on the property of this tantric teacher couple in Maui. They were awesome people. They were hilarious, but the guy was like sniffing girls' underwear, like this, one of the other girls living there. She had her clothes out on the clothes hanger and she caught him like walking up and sniffing her underwear. He like touched a couple of girls inappropriately. There's a lot of this stuff in the tantra scene, right? And I think what this often is basically people use these kinds of practices, tantra, whatever, almost as like an excuse to live out their sexual fantasies and their sexual obsessions because they haven't really integrated them in some way. So it's like, oh well, it's my spiritual path. I need to sexually heal all these people because I'm so divine and they need my sexual healing. It can be ego, they can be sexual vampires, or they can legitimately be interested in helping people awaken their sexual energy and use it consciously. It's really the full gamut of all these things, and you really never know what you're getting yourself into. And this is why it's important for you to be clear about why are you doing this. Do you really just want to like pay someone to give you a hand job and like make you feel like it's being something spiritual because they're guiding you through, they have one hand on your chakra, the other hand they're jerking you off. I'm not saying it's necessarily that type of tantric massage. This is a vague question, and it can be a pretty shady area. So it's not necessary, it's again, it's just something you have to really like. What is it you really want in your practice? And will this support you? And really reading the person who's doing it, because it can get weird and it can also be helpful. Just being real with it. I've seen a lot of shit out there. Stay sharp out there, kids. Sepe says, thanks for being so open. I just heard you talking about not forcing chi. So I want to stress how important that is. That's where all my problems came from. Yeah. So, I first learned the very forceful practices. I don't want to like talk down on systems, but, the first system I studied with, some of the stuff is very, very forceful. Like you're packing the chi, you're forcing, you're breathing forcefully and just shoving energy into places that can really mess you up in the long term. That's kind of, a lot of the fire practices are like that, where it's like forceful, you get really quick results, you get high really quickly, but in the long term, you kind of get stuck because that fire burns out, it becomes stagnant. So um, you can, yeah, the more calm, allowing the, it's balancing yin and yang in your practice, right? And this is why I really got into the true Taoist practices, is because they are it's the water path. You're not forcing, you're allowing things to build over time and kind of naturally dissolve as they are. Anyways. Ross says, can a person that has been recirculating the semen up the spine for a few years still have an ejaculation in case they one day decide to have a baby? Well, the first thing is that the semen itself doesn't move up the spine. There's no physiological pathway for the semen to move from where it's stored up the spine of the body. There's a bit of a misunderstanding there. Circulating what you're doing is circulating the essence of that semen, the jing qi, and then over time the semen die, the body urinates them out, you have a wet dream, whatever. So, or if you're doing the like $1 million point type stuff where you actually are losing it into the bladder and things like that. So, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but yeah, the semen itself doesn't go up the spine. But yeah, as far as you're practicing, semen retention for years, you can definitely still have an ejaculation. I would, if it actually has been years since you've ejaculated, like a truly ejaculated, not having like retrograde ejaculations, then you might want to release it first once or twice to kind of clear out the old sperm and then build up some fresh ones to make that baby. Amber says, thanks for the insights. Yeah, thanks for listening. Glad you find it helpful. All right, guys, just a couple more questions here. Harshvardhan says, is doing microcosmic orbit meditation important apart from testicle breathing, like doing it separately? I think it is important in that it really teaches you this pathway. And if you do this, you work with it this way and then add in testicle breathing, it will be more effective. But again, testicle breathing basically is microcosmic orbit, but it's driven by your sexual energy. It's driven by that jing qi. So it's just another way of running the orbit, and something that I work with pretty frequently as well. Dirk Trevino says, general thoughts on binaural beats. Do you think they actually work? I used to use them a lot, and it's difficult for me to really say. I used to use them for power naps a lot. There was like a 20-minute power nap one I found I would use, and I would drop into a like theta state pretty quickly, and it felt like it gave me a really refreshing power nap. So the science is there on it. It's basically these two frequencies, and there's just a little bit, a few hertz off, and the brain sorts that difference between the frequencies and adjusts to that brainwave state, right? So it can affect your brain state, but you can do that with meditation when you train. So I like to not rely on external things, but sometimes it's helpful to have them. Okay, guys, probably gonna be the last question. Harshvardhan says, after nofap, I become very sensitive. Then how do I control premature ejaculation? Either fap before sex or do something else? Okay, so this is the thing of just kind of suppressing your sexual energy and not engaging with this area of the body. What happens is the sexual energy starts to build, all this pressure starts to build. It's like you're loading a gun. It really is when you're practicing semen retention. And if you aren't doing something to release that pressure, to relieve it in some way, then you're ready to blow when you start having sex. You become very, very sensitive, right? This is very common, actually, just based on how many men have asked me about this issue. I didn't really experience this because I began semen retention doing all the sexual kung fu practice. It was kind of a byproduct of my practice was that I started doing semen retention. Um, so basically, you must be able to resolve that sexual pressure. This is why testicle breathing is an essential practice, microcosmic orbit, when you're practicing semen retention or nofap, as well as meditation practices where you're again drawing that sexual energy through the body. Grounding practice, the Zhan Zhuang Qigong, really helps with this. And another huge thing here is pelvic floor tension. Notice if you tend to be holding a Kegel engagement throughout your day, if your pelvic floor is tight, that causes premature ejaculation. So check out my YouTube video, Pelvic Floor Rehab. I teach some great exercises to release these tension patterns. That's the biggest factor in lasting longer, is being able to keep your pelvic floor relaxed. But the other big thing here is simply training yourself, being able to, because if you haven't trained yourself to last longer during sex, how are you going to last longer during sex? So this is what sexual kung fu is all about. You learn to directly stimulate your sexual energy, practice drawing it through your body to build your ejaculation control. And you may want to, because when you go a month without having without touching your penis, no stimulation, it becomes very, very sensitive. So when you have some sort of practice of stimulating it as training to activate that energy, make sure it's not just kind of atrophying down there, right? It keeps things fresh and you stay on your game, so to speak, of being able to control that. So this is really part of sexual kung fu. Is you're not just, it's different than the nofap approach. Like, okay, I can't touch my penis, can't jerk off. You're actively engaging with that energy and keeping it moving rather than just trying to stop it from doing anything. It's different. And the question is, I took your energy upgrade course. You teach 3 Qigong practices in there, but you also teach other Qigongs on YouTube, like Sun Moon Qigong and others. Should we do them all? No, I don't recommend doing all of them. Yeah, you can kind of cycle between them. I recommend that you pick a couple that you really like. I think it's good to do both a standing practice, like the Zhan Zhuang, just static standing, which is kind of the basis of being able to really do Qigong. And you pick a movement practice. So I have several on my Qigong playlist. There's some in that course as well. Simply pick a movement practice you like. And, if you have 10 minutes to practice, do 5 minutes of holding the posture, 5 minutes of the movement Qigong. Or, if you have 10 minutes or if you have 20 minutes, twice as long of each. So just see which one you like to do the most, which you get the most effect from, and focus on that. Don't feel like you have to do everything. Okay, guys, thanks for joining. Always good to see you guys. Thanks for bringing your great questions. And I may not be going live next week. I'm getting all my stuff moved out of this house because I'm going to hit the road for the next few months. And so I'm not sure if I'll be live next week, but I will catch you guys soon. Take care out there and cultivate harmony, balance. The world's a beautiful place if we allow ourselves to stay in the beauty of nature, the natural world, the harmony of flow between the phases of creation energies. And that's what it's all about. Take care, guys.